So I would like to welcome our next speaker, Erik Jan Pleijster. He's a senior landscape architect. He's the founder and CEO of LOLA Landscape Architecture. So they are working amazing projects of urban space in the Netherlands and also abroad. So they are now internationally working in Shenzhen in China and Germany, the Adidas headquarters, beautiful project. So I give you the floor to you, please. Thank you. Thank you. Big applause for him. Thanks.
Hi. I brought my telephone to the stage because please remind me that I'm going to take a picture of this amazing crowd at the end of the speech. Because I have never stood in front of so many people actually, and especially not so many landscape architects. Which makes it quite difficult because you are all experts about what I'm going to share with you. But my presentation is called Optimistic Futurism in the Age of Climate Change. And it's about the work that we do as an office, as practitioners, based in Rotterdam. My office is called LOLA Landscape Architects. LOLA, of course, is a name that sounds very well, very attractive, but it's actually an abbreviation for lost landscapes, which means that we focus on the redevelopment of landscapes instead of developing natural landscapes into a cultural one. We rather make use of what's already there, but it's just not in an optimal state, and we would like to make it better. We would like to improve it. For instance, and this is a little bit of a scoop, but Feyenoord City, the football club in Rotterdam on the South Bank, is such a project. Right now it's, you might say, a derelict area, very disconnected from the city, a lot of asphalt, lower income, and we try to improve that situation by redeveloping the stadium and everything that's around it. But I'm not going to talk about that project. I'm going to talk about a couple of unbuilt, quite visionary projects on a different scale. And it all has to do with the great acceleration. And you might know these pictures. They're beautiful pictures by Edward Bertinsky, showing the effect that we have on Earth. Beautiful, but also very disturbing when it comes to taking fossil fuel from the Earth or cutting down the forests. And in a scheme, in a diagram, it kind of looks like this. You all know this diagram, of course, where the effect that we have on the Earth in the last 50 years is so immense. And the downside to it is that biodiversity, for instance, is rapidly declining. And it's even a bit more complex, of course, because right now we're talking about tipping points, big ecosystems and effects that might cause a domino effect of triggers when it comes to climate change. The cutting down the forest is actually linked to melting of the ice caps, and melting of the ice caps is actually linked to heating up the Earth. So you see it's all very much interconnected, and that's why it's also very difficult to predict the direction the Earth is heading into and the amount or the extent to which climate change will have. I very much like this diagram. I hope you all can see it, but this is a diagram that shows an inventory made by the World Economic Forum for the world threats. And the world threats, and on the horizontal axis you can see the probability of the world threat, and on the vertical axis you can see the impact. And the ones that I actually highlighted in green, those are the ones that are climatic, you might say, environmental. These are the ones that landscape architects actually can influence, I like to think. When it comes to the water crisis or the failure of climate mitigation or biodiversity, they're all in this green oval, and which means that the effect of these threats is very severe, high impact, but also very likely to happen. Landscape architects have the power to deal with these threats. I marked two in red. One is weapons of mass destruction. very high impact, a little bit less likely, but very much up there. And failure of urban planning, not a high impact, but very likely to happen. So take that, urban planners. But okay, our future is uncertain, and we call it deep uncertainty. And how to plan actually into this deep uncertainty? How can you do it? I'd like to think it's actually rather simple. We just have to look further into the future. We have to plan further ahead. If I would have students right now, I would say to them, we have to develop your future thinking. Instead of only designing on the short term, we have to think further ahead to deal with all the changes. What to do? I have brought two plans, two ideas that I'd like to share with you. Plan A, Plan B, and actually this afternoon I added Plan Z to it. It's not in here, but so Plan A, let's start with Plan A. Plan A is basically saying, let's do everything we can to make the Paris Climate Agreement work. Because if we make it work, then the temperature doesn't rise too much, and the sea level, as a result of that, will only rise approximately between 1 and 2 meters, as you can see here. And, well, this is the country where I'm from. It's the Netherlands. And this is all the area that's not only below sea level, but also, how would you say, vulnerable for flooding from the rivers. And you can also see that in the lighter color gray, there are many people living there. Actually, 9 million people are living in the flood vulnerable areas of the Netherlands. So you can imagine that 2 meters of sea level rise can have a high impact. But fortunately, throughout the years, actually since over 2,000 years, we have developed a system of dikes that we built around the country, and in the country it's like a giant maze of dikes, and they protect us very well. They protect us very well. The last years, or actually since 1953, no one died of flooding in the Netherlands. And for a delta, and in most deltas, there's a lot of flooding yearly. There's a lot of people dying from flood every year. But the Netherlands haven't seen one death in over 50 years. But these dikes, and even if we want to deal with this 1 to 2 meter sea level rise, they need constant maintenance. They need constant fortification, the raising of the dikes, to make them work, and to keep the people, the 9 million people living behind them, safe. And here you can see the amount of work that's been done on a yearly basis, fortifying and extending actually the dikes. So in 2024, we actually have over 300 kilometers of fortified dikes. So that would be Plan A. I mean, if this would work, and we have the system to keep ourselves safe and dry in the Netherlands, then Plan A is basically to make sure the Paris Climate Agreement will be a success, which means landscape architects have to do basically everything possible to avoid the triggers of climate change. And not only for the Netherlands, of course, because it's just an example, but for the worldwide problems. And to illustrate this, I've brought one project, Prison Quarter Amsterdam. We call it Bias Kwartier, which means prison quarter, which is about redeveloping the urban domain and building a circular economy and establishing a thriving ecology in it. This is the prison, as you can see. It's a prison from the 70s, located in Amsterdam, a modernistic structure made out of several towers. Here you can see them. These are the prison towers, and the wall around it with the moat or the canal. The spaces where the prisoners would go to sports or to take air. And this would be the inside of this prison. And the nice thing, because it's from the 70s, it also had a different type of idea about how prisoners should be treated and how they should live. And they actually live a little bit like I lived when I was a student. You had a little room, and then you had a hallway, and during the day the doors would be open, and the prisoners could just go into the common ground, in the communal space. do some cooking, talking, playing table tennis, and at the end of the day they would return in their prison cell and the door would close. But nowadays we don't have enough prisoners in the Netherlands to fill this prison. So it's kind of obsolete, it's also a bit outdated, and that's why it was decided to transform this prison into a neighborhood, because Amsterdam doesn't have enough prisoners, but we do have a shortage of housing in Amsterdam, a big shortage of housing. So together with actually a large team, and a team that was growing and growing and growing in the end, we won a tender to redevelop this housing, or this prison, into a housing quarter. And what is nice is that it was just discussed actually that landscape architects are actually in the middle of the team. This would be the urban context shown with the redevelopment of the prison into a green area that's actually very well connected to the city, which not only connects to the green in the neighborhoods, but also adds a lot of green, which you can see here. This would be new clusters of housing, schools, large buildings, built upon the foundations of the prison in the same style and the same idea, but separated by large areas of green and surrounded by ecological canal. This is what it would look like, and you can see there's also a lot of green roofs. I personally believe a lot in green roofs, but it's true what Henry says, as long as you have enough soil, which is very important. Would look something like this, and I'm going through it a little bit quickly, and because this might be actually more important, the Sustainability Master Plan. This master plan, or the Sustainability Master Plan behind the whole development, is so rich. It basically has everything you can do to create a sustainable housing quarter. It's well connected to its surroundings and to the ecological structures. It adds a lot of green, a lot of habitat space for flora and fauna. It uses the heritage and it reuses all the material that's coming from breaking down a couple of the prison towers. I forgot to mention that the prison towers need to be redeveloped because the prisons are, as you might imagine, not suitable to transform into housing directly. The ceilings are too low to actually make nice houses in it. So you have to deconstruct them and build them up again in a different way. We have a smart electricity grid. We try to save as much energy, but also try to produce a thermal grid, a green-blue network where we try to store as much rainwater as possible and reuse it on site. There's a waste cycle where we transform waste on site into heat and into gas. We think in healthy urban living labs. We try to stimulate movement for the health of the people, and there's a sustainable mobility plan inside. So you can see there's actually a lot inside, and it goes even a little bit further where we say, okay, indeed, the rooftops are also included, but we also have to make the buildings themselves nature inclusive. The buildings themselves, they might be, this is the way we look at them, a habitat for birds, for insects, for small mammals, for anything living. When the building is actually suitable to live for other animals, then it's also suitable for us. And imagine what, and this is what I want to show, we even want to take that one step further. So what I want to mention is, besides rooftops, we're also integrating nesting cages, etc., into these buildings. But we also want to communicate the presence of flora and fauna with the inhabitants of this housing complex by, for instance, trying to have a counter saying not only how many people are living in the housing area, in the prison quarter, but also how many beds, how many butterflies, how many squirrels, how many bees, and maybe even showing their breeding online. No, but seriously, because you have to imagine that people and nature, they have a very special relationship. Everybody knows that when you're ill and you see green around you, you become better faster, right? Everybody knows that when you hear a bird whistling, it makes you happy. You know, it makes people happy and it makes them more healthy. So why not try to stimulate this interaction in an area where that would be rather difficult in the middle of the city? So as landscape architects, we need to make energy neutral, nature inclusive and context aware designs. And we need to make landscape inventions when we can, to strengthen the above and to inspire others to do equally so. I like to think sometimes as myself as a landscape inventor. Okay. But, and this is where Plan B comes into action. What if the climate agreement doesn't work? And it's actually very likely, I might say, that, or it's at least very difficult to reach the climate agreement goals. In the Netherlands, people are already wary that it might cost them a lot of money and it might not work in the end. So it's a big challenge. And when big countries like America aren't cooperating, you can imagine it's like, yeah, it's not so good. And that's why The Guardian is already talking about a climate crisis instead of just climate change. They replaced the word climate change with climate crisis. So what if it wouldn't work? That would mean that the sea level, or that the amount, the Earth is warming up faster than the couple of degrees that was the goal. And that would actually mean that the sea level will rise higher than was expected, higher than the 2 meters. It could be possible. It's very discussable. There's a lot of different opinions about this because it's a very complex matter, of course. But it could be possible, the melting of the ice caps, and that would, in the most extreme scenario of the IPCC, mean that the sea level would rise 3 meters by 2100 and 6 meters by 2200. 6 meters. Imagine what that would do with the Netherlands. It would be a Dutch dystopia. Why? Because it's highly unlikely, and this image was not made by myself but by Deltares, it's highly unlikely that we can use the current system of dikes that were invented before the beginning of our time. It's very unlikely that this system can deal with such high sea levels. Why? Because we need a lot of sand, we need a lot of money to do so. We need very big pumps to pump all the water, all the surplus water out of the country. And it's probably also not acceptable to close off an entire country by building these big walls around the country, prohibiting, for instance, the use of the harbors, like Rotterdam. And that's why, and you can also see it, there's a lot of like doom scenarios about the Netherlands. For instance, this book describes the end of the Western civilization, and they use the Netherlands as the main example. The nation formerly known as the Netherlands, it's on page 1. How to live in a country like that, where people are predicting a future disaster. But also in the Netherlands ourselves, we aren't doing really better. We're making documentaries like a Netflix documentary, a series thing. It has even been on Netflix, I think, where we describe a giant disaster, the breaking of the dikes and people dying, people fleeing, and people sitting in power poles for days waiting to be rescued. That's a very dramatic future we're describing here. And that's why, and I can totally imagine that young people in Belgium and in the Netherlands, and I saw there's also a climate march here in Oslo that I might join, they're protesting. They don't know what will happen to their future. And they're engaged and they're activistic, and I can completely understand. And at a certain point I saw this picture, and I mean, yeah, of course, this is, I love these make the planet great again. But there's also this one. There is no plan B, planet B. There is no plan B. And I kind of like saw a challenge there. Okay, there's no plan B. What? We landscape architects, we make plans. That is our purpose. So why not make a plan for the future, a plan B besides plan A that I just showed you, plan A being do everything we can. So far all we hear are doom stories, and the media might be causing a worldwide eco-anxiety. You know, we cannot let the media put us down by telling us that everything will go wrong. We have to not get depressed about this. We have to step up, be positive, and come up with new solutions. So this is also the feeling that I've got from also the perspective of my office, LOLA Landscape Architects, that we refuse to stand aside, wait, and do nothing. I mean, we can sit and wait until the phone rings and the government is on the phone and asks us to make a plan to save the world, but it will not happen. So we have to do it ourselves. We have to step up and show other people, show the government as well, that we are willing and able to think about it. And we believe that we should explore new options. So not just plan A, not just only thinking in dikes and in polders and in, well, the way we have been doing the last 2,000 years, but we have maybe also other options. So option plan B. The goal, to think about the future Netherlands with no disasters and no climate refugees. Perhaps nobody even dying. So it's not like a disaster-infused scenario, it's actually pre-disaster. Why? Well, because we can. The Netherlands have a very nice tradition in land making, in land designing, and also in water safety and water safety plans. This is the Delta plan, and these are plans of giant polders that have been made 40, 50 years ago. So we have this great tradition, and we also have a great tradition in spatial planning. That we actually have forgotten in the financial crisis a little bit. And we have been adapting to sea level rise throughout. Every time we were raising the dikes, When there was a disaster, we created new dikes. So what I want to propose is to think in different options. So not just plan A doing everything we can, but also explore other options and see how we can get there. So imagine a future Netherlands without dikes and polders, and imagine it even better than it already is. This is the Netherlands, the higher area, and this is the low-lying area. This is the map that I already showed you with all the 9 million people living in there. And we basically say, let's move. Let's start a completely new economy, a moving economy. Let's invent how we can move our houses, our roads, our households, our families to the east, where it's higher and drier. Let's think about that. Could it be possible that we will be the main movers of the world, moving deltas? And we sketched a design like this, and I see this as design, regional design or even national design. This is not planning, this is landscape architecture. And you see a completely new Netherlands with two coastlines, one on the west, one on the east, and a giant lagoon in the middle. And this lagoon is not empty, but it's inhabited with all sorts of cities, towns, agglomerations, farms, and quickly hovering over it from north to south, you can see new islands being created, new coastal roads, a lagoon where people are floating, where old towns are preserved by giant dikes, old towns that we find so valuable that we are willing to put a lot of money into it. The east, that is more like an agglomeration now, instead of the small towns that we have right now, that would be like completely new cities being developed over there. It's basically the inverse of the current Netherlands. Since time is running, I have to speed things up a little bit, but this is not a commissioned project. This is stepping up when you think something is missing. This is not a doom scenario. This is thinking positively, and I put it here because I had to explain it a number of times in the Netherlands. I said, is this giving up? Is this defeat? Is this giving up all our values as Dutch people who claimed the earth from the sea and built farms and built cities in it? No, this is not giving up. This is spreading our chances. So what's next? Well, this is a website, nl2300.org. We're trying to create a little organization that creates alternative plans to inspire the government, but also give tools to the future generations like yourselves. This is what you actually can do. Get involved. Get involved. This is my address. You can get involved if you like. And then, I've got 20 seconds, but it might be a minute more. Plan Z. I just talked about the nuclear threat, right? The nuclear threat. So, and this is from a science fiction series that I like a lot. It's called The Expanse. For those of you who know it, it's a little bit nerdy, but okay. It's an image of a nuclear bomb exploding on Earth, and I hope you don't appreciate this picture, but would it be the end? No. Landscape architecture of space. Because we are landscape architects, we can think about the future. The sky is ours, that's being said, but maybe space is ours as well. And I'm not the first to say that, of course. I mean, already in the 70s, people were thinking about living in space. Step one, living in space. But when I saw this picture, I thought, okay, this is a landscape architect's job, right? But you just have to use your imagination and your creativity and put it out there. You don't need a client, you can just start thinking. Landscape architectural space. Step one, living in space. Step two, a little bit more difficult for us, I think, but inhabiting new planets. And maybe we don't find a planet that's looking so well and so closely to our planet as this one in Lost in Space, but maybe it's more like this one. The red planet. And the red planet is like a giant red desert, of course. And I don't know if you have seen this movie, but it's The Martian. And for those who have seen it, or haven't seen it, Matt Damon gets lost on Mars, and the first thing he does is go inside, build a dome, and the next thing he does is, of course, very interesting. He performs landscape architecture. Matt Damon being the first landscape architect in space. But I think that's a role that landscape architects should also have. He started farming. And look how happy he is. Next thing, building a new city. Once we have the farms, we can build the new cities, and this is obviously also a landscape architect's role. And finally, the last thing is terraforming the planet. And as you know, SpaceX is actually thinking about this, terraforming the planet, making Mars inhabitable by providing an atmosphere. This is again from the same science fiction series, a before-after situation, before terraforming and after terraforming. A desert that actually eventually transforms into a green planet and eventually informs into a civilization. And I'm pretty sure that if landscape architects would have made these visualizations, that it would have looked completely different. Maybe this is a dystopia, for others it's a technological utopia. I just think that we always need to think ahead and maybe also take care, because history might repeat itself. Maybe we are able to terraform Mars into a certain kind of second Earth, but yeah, maybe we destroy it again, just like we're doing with our planet. So, final thoughts. Focus on Plan A first. Do everything we can to reach the climate goals, so we don't have to go to Mars, right? These are all no regret measures. I mean, we can't go wrong. Everything we're doing is good, right? Making green city districts, utilizing the green roofs, making buildings nature inclusive, it's no regret. And parallelly to that, create Plan B, C, D, how many you like. Landscape architects have the power to build alternative future options. So let's do so. Let's think further ahead, outside the box. Let's utilize new ways of creating. And then at the end of Plan Z, and there's a little smiling at the end, of course, become landscape architects of space. This is my dream. I thank you very much.
you. Wow. Thank you for these visions. I think, well, everybody is now, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to say, and we won't let them ask questions. So, we just, I'm not allowed.
Oh, I went too long. But just ask. Oh.
The picture, yes, we can do that. Okay.
Well, okay, yeah. Let's think of a nice question. Hands up in the air if you think landscape architects are the best professions in the world. That's one for in the picture book. Thank you very much.
That's amazing. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Eric. It was inspiring. Oh, great. So very quickly, I have to call the next speaker. I would invite Professor Jala Masumi to join us. She's a professor of landscape architecture in the American University in Beirut, so in the Lebanon, and she has been practicing there for 35 years. So she's basically the pioneer